cases of COVID-19 on PEI and a stern warning tonight from Premier Dennis King.
The time for education is over. The time for enforcement starts now. No more warnings. Every islander knows what they have to do, and they have to do it now.
Strict enforcement measures are now in place on PEI for people who do not follow public health orders. There are stronger screening efforts at the Confederation Bridge, and the province is expanding testing to fight the spread of COVID-19. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on Compass. More than half a dozen more people on PEI are at home tonight because they have COVID-19. These new cases were announced this afternoon. There are 7 of them. That brings the total on the island to 18. Here's what we know about these latest ones. Their ages ranging from in their 20s to their 70s. All of them traveled internationally, and they all did self-isolate when they came back. All were tested within the last 2 or 3 days and are now at home and doing well. And enforcement has now begun around self-isolation. We have details on that, and there is more testing happening as well at clinics in Charlottetown and Summerside. Brian Higgins joins me tonight live in the studio with the details. So, Brian, let's begin with enforcement. It began in earnest over the weekend.
Indeed it did, Louise. The health department told us today that they've received 2,000 phone calls from islanders in the past 2 weeks about concerns, about perceptions that others are not complying with self-isolation orders. And this weekend, enforcement began to roll out here on PEI by the province's conservation officers, who began knocking on doors, issuing written warnings and giving verbal warnings as well. Specifically, the health department told us today that there have been 56 complaints investigated, 26 households were visited, 12 verbal warnings have been issued, and 9 written warnings, which could lead to fines. We were also told by the public health officer today that the enforcement officers, in some cases, are having to make multiple trips to individual households to ensure that people do what they're told to do.
So those complaints are taken seriously. I know our enforcement officers are doing so, and it may be a range of situations, and they've had to go back to people's homes sometimes more than once and make sure they find people home.
And Louise, the Premier came out swinging on this today, as we'll hear more of later in the program. Basically, he was saying that people have to be living under a rock not to know what's going on and to understand the severity of it.
The new clinics, Brian, are now open in Charlottetown and Summerside. How are they working?
Well, yes, we were informed today that the province's 2 new cough and fever assessment centers are now up and running. Summerside's came online today. Charlottetown's was up and running over the weekend, located at the Civic Center. Now, at the same time as these cough and flu clinics are going, the drive-through testing facilities for the COVID-19 itself are also working side by side at these facilities. So dozens of people have now had the drive-through test or the cough and fever assessment over the weekend. PEI's chief nurse told us today about the facilities. She described how the cough and fever clinic works and its ability to handle more cases.
For the assessment clinic, they do park and come inside the building at their appointment time, and then they are greeted by staff just inside the entrance. I know right now we could likely increase it to twice the amount if we needed to, but so far we're just monitoring the numbers as they come in and doing everything we can to meet the demand, and we have been able to do that.
So there's lots more testing and lots more test results to come in days ahead, Louise. We do know that there have been 600 tests back, all of them negative. And of the 18 cases that have been identified, 1 person is fully recovered. There have been no hospitalizations. We also know that all of these 18 cases are travel related, so we know how the bug got here. At this point, there has been no confirmation of community transmission in which the virus is moving from person to person on the island. However, today, Louise, Dr. Morrison did say, while speaking in French, that she fully anticipates that community transmission will eventually be occurring here on PEI.
I know she's mentioned that as a worrying trend across the country. Brian, thank you for that. It's Brian Higgins reporting live in studio for us tonight. And here's more specifics on those numbers that Brian was just telling us about. There have been 769 tests done in total. As we mentioned, 18 now positive with those 7 new cases announced today. 590 of them are negative. 161 cases are still pending. That means the results have not yet come back. 1 person is now considered to be recovered. With today's new cases, Dr. Morrison again told Islanders how important it is to practice physical distancing. And she spent some time talking about what that actually means in different circumstances. Travis Kingdon has more on that for us now.
It's been just over 2 weeks since Dr. Heather Morrison told all Islanders to stay home, saying that the best way for everyone to stay safe right now is to stay apart. And today she was reminding Islanders of how to stay safe when venturing outside of their homes.
Let's start with the fact that everyone needs to remember to stay home as much as possible. If you do need to leave the house, you should practice physical distancing.
Morrison says over the weekend she saw Islanders heading out to get some fresh air to the beach or to the park in groups. But even outside, she has a message about those gatherings.
Now is not the time.
Morrison says she understands and that she also misses her friends and family. And she can see why people want to get together and chat when they're outdoors, but she says keeping 6 feet of space between you and your friends as you catch up on your driveway or in a parking lot isn't a solution, because people naturally want to come together.
Of course, if you're walking and you're walking by each other in the street, it would be normal to maintain the 6 foot distance and say hi, but not to stop for long periods of time and decide to have an hour conversation out there. I think it's hard for people to stay physically distant from each other for long periods of time if you're out on the street.
Dr. Morrison says while it might be tough now, this isn't forever, but says it will be a lot longer if Islanders don't do everything they can now. Travis Kingdon, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Well, in her briefing today, Dr. Morrison clarified further what is not proper physical distancing. Have a listen.
Physical distancing is not going to visit family and friends. It's not having people over to your home. Physical distancing is not meeting up in groups outside. Physical distancing is not grocery shopping in groups. Physical distancing is not having play dates with other children. And physical distancing is not having coffee with a friend. I, too, would love to do many of these things, but now is not the time. Right now, the best way we can show our love and appreciation for others is to protect them by staying apart.
And there were some strong words today from the Premier. He was self-isolating for 2 weeks because he was out of the country. Now that time has ended, and today he told Islanders in no uncertain words to follow directions.
We have been navigating this situation in our province with Dr. Morrison's expert advice. If I'm being honest, and I will always be honest with Islanders, I am disappointed that some still aren't listening to her. She leaned on the goodwill of Islanders and asked us to practice social distancing if we had to go out, to self-isolate if we have been traveling out of province. Then she had to tell us to do this because asking nicely didn't work. We brought in fines, significant ones, and engaged law enforcement to ensure Islanders are following Dr. Morrison's direction that she is giving to keep us all safe, to keep Islanders from getting sick or worse, from dying. This still isn't enough for some of you. So I'm asking the Attorney General to reinforce all island law enforcement to make this a priority and fully enforce Dr. Morrison's directions. The time for education is over. The time for enforcement starts now. No more warnings. Every Islander knows what they have to do, and they have to do it now.
And there was some new government initiatives announced today as well, financial programs for landlords of both commercial and residential properties. The government is extending the moratorium on evictions from public housing until June, and it is asking the courts to ban rental evictions from privately owned apartments because of COVID-19.
Well, after a gorgeous and sunny weekend with mild temperatures, we were back to cloudier skies today. We have not only snow in the forecast, some heavier rain, and by the time the week is out, even some strong winds. And I'll have the details on all of that coming up a little later on Compass.
PEI's hotel operators are being hit hard by COVID-19. Many of the island's hotels have closed, throwing hundreds of people out of work. Industry leaders are calling it catastrophic. Wayne Thibodeau has more.
The Great George Hotel here in historic downtown Charlottetown has been welcoming guests for more than 150 years. But today, the doors are closed, like a lot of hotels in Charlottetown and across Prince Edward Island. The president of the Hotel Association of Prince Edward Island says COVID-19 has been catastrophic for the industry on the island.
Once you start looking at occupancies below 10%, it's really not feasible to operate a hotel. So because of that, hotels are closing. In PEI alone, most hotels in Charlottetown and Summerside, which at this time of year where most of the operating hotels are closed.
Landmark properties across the province have closed their doors, including the Delta Prince Edward and the Rod Charlottetown in the capital city. And in Prince County, the newly renovated Mill River Resort has laid off 80 workers. Kevin Murphy is president and CEO of Murphy Hospitality Group, which owns the Great George and the Hotel on Pono.
It's been a major impact that basically in the last 10 days, all restaurants have shut down. All the staff have been laid off. A lot of the hotels, if not them all now, have pretty well closed. So it's been very serious, and we're doing what we can just to get through it.
The Hotel Association is fearful that even if the issues surrounding COVID-19 do not extend into PEI's peak summer season, that people may still not feel confident in traveling. Still, the industry group says Prince Edward Island is a great place to travel, and the guests will return. The question is, when? Wayne Thibodeau, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Well, the hotel industry is one of many that relies heavily on tourism. The COVID-19 pandemic is walloping the entire sector. Another reminder came yesterday. That is when the first cruise ships of the season were supposed to drop anchor here. Now, that season, of course, won't begin until July 1st. Kevin Mouflier is the CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of PEI and joins me via Skype today. Good to see you, Kevin. How worried are your members right now?
Very worried at this point, very concerned. It's a big impact on our industry in whole.
What kind of impact are you bracing for?
Well, again, I think it really impacts broadly in our industry, particularly you look at restaurants, cruise ships, experiential tourism, tour guides, motor coach, farm to table businesses, theater, golf, ferry. Again, seasonal and year-round accommodation operators at gift shops, pottery, sports tourism, culture attractions, air travel. It's significant.
Yeah, I mean, it is overwhelming when you list all those industries and how they are all being impacted by this. Do you think that PEI is more vulnerable?
I think that PEI actually is as vulnerable as anywhere. Tourism provides a significant economic impact, as you know, to our province, generating over $70 million in tax revenues, again, supporting various sectors as well, health, education, roads. All provinces, as I mentioned, are vulnerable, but as a primary sector, we'll need to put a lot of effort and focus on rebuilding our industry, I think, which is a critical piece into the future. Particularly, we're a safe destination. We provide memorable island hospitality. I think we have an opportunity once the pandemic has been lifted to really focus on rubber tire traffic, particularly staycations, Ontario, Quebec, the Maritimes. But again, this is definitely going to have a drastic impact on our sector amongst many sectors.
So do we know how many job losses there have been so far, how many we could see here?
I've heard hundreds of jobs, again, particularly for the large chains, but also the small operators. You look at the restaurants, that's a huge impact. Again, it's concerning, again, 85% of our businesses in PEI are small businesses, so significant to our island. And again, it's particularly important that we can pick up after this is over and work together, which we tend to do well in our province.
There have been a number of both federal and provincial financial aid packages announced, and today we heard some new federal measures. That is a 75% wage subsidy for businesses that are able to show their revenues have fallen by 30% because of COVID-19. Will that come as some good news to some of your members?
Yes. Again, I look at members, tourism as a whole. They're all members at this point in time. We all have to work together. And I think all these announcements are coming very quickly. The most important thing right now, Louise, is that we have clear definition on how they qualify. And again, it's most important for our industry that there's more mention of what they'll do for the small businesses, and particularly the seasonality of our business as well. Because again, a lot of these people are expecting business levels to click in on a normal basis at this time of year, particularly in May and June. That's going to be delayed. We don't know for how many months. And again, it impacts on their whole business for the season.
Kevin Moufley, nice to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Louise.
The owner of T3 Transit says ridership is down by about 80%. He says people are still using the bus to go to work, medical appointments, or for groceries, but bus drivers are now asking people where they're going, and if they are not traveling for an essential service, they're not being allowed on the bus.
We are finding that when we bring it up to passengers, that they are understanding and they will not get on the bus. Now, we do have a few of what we call our regular passengers that have been with us for a good number of years, and they find it very difficult to understand that they can just not step up to the curb at a bus stop and jump on a bus the way they used to.
A couple of bus drivers are not working right now because they have vulnerable family members, but Cassidy says as an essential service, the buses will continue to operate. Well, I mentioned a few moments ago that new program around wage subsidies from the federal government. Ottawa gave new details about that today. Last week, the federal government offered a 75% wage subsidy to businesses to help pay workers. But that was just for small and mid-sized businesses. Now it includes big businesses, charities, and nonprofit organizations, as long as their revenue has decreased by at least 30%. The Prime Minister says he's counting on businesses to act in good faith.
Every business of every size is having to make some difficult decisions because of COVID-19, and that's why the number of employees is not the eligibility criteria we've chosen. If you think this is a system you can take advantage of or game, don't. There will be serious consequences for those who do.
The subsidy means Ottawa will cover a worker's salary by up to $847 per week, backdated to mid-March. As we go to break, a live look outside our studio in Charlottetown on this Monday evening. Jay's full forecast is coming up after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time to check in with Jay Scotland now live from his back deck remote weather bureau. And there is a special weather statement in effect for PEI he's got to tell us all about.
Yes, reporting from the Winslow Weather Bureau again. And we do have a special weather statement in effect, Louise, all 3 counties. And this has to do with some snow and some rain, but I think more so to do with the rain. That is the bigger concern here because we're going to see some snow, then some warmer temperatures. That means some melting snow. The ground will be saturated. Below that saturated layer, we have frozen ground, and that means that there is an increased risk of some localized flooding, particularly some basement flooding if your basement is prone to it, as we get into your Wednesday and Thursday with 15 to 30 millimeters of rain. So let's take a look at the special weather statement in effect now for all 3 counties. We are looking at that for, it's calling for 2 to 5 centimeters of snow, followed by 15 to 30 millimeters of rain. I would say 2 to maybe even just over 6 centimeters of snow possible. And the range will be lighter end of that range for eastern areas, heavier end of that range, potential up west, where you could see amounts over 5 centimeters possible. This will be moving in for early tomorrow morning as flurries and then becoming steadier mid to late morning and continuing through the afternoon. So here's a look at our satellite and radar picture. An area of low pressure is to our south, trough of low pressure extending to its north and west. But I want you to pay attention to that weak trough that is currently sitting just east of Newfoundland. That's actually a warm front that will be moving in from a very odd direction. It's going to start to move in from the north and east. So we'll see snow starting steadily through the mid to late morning tomorrow, continuing through the afternoon. And then as that warm air starts to arrive, maybe a brief period of mixing and freezing rain Tuesday night, transitioning over to steady rain with warmer temperatures Wednesday morning. And that rain will be falling heavily at times through the afternoon, not tapering off to showers until we get to Thursday morning. So significant amount of rain after a light dosing of snow. All right, through the overnight hours tonight, temperatures between -2 and -3 over western PEI. Steady snow really firing up by about mid-morning tomorrow. Flurries could start earlier ahead of that and continuing through the afternoon. Temperatures around or just above the freezing mark in most areas. -1 to +1 will be the range of temperatures. Cloudy conditions overnight for central and eastern PEI, and then that flurry activity arriving by early morning, the steadier snow mid-morning heading into the afternoon. And this will all come with brisk northeast winds, 25 to 15 kilometers to 50 kilometers per hour possible. So some blowing snow as that steadier snow is falling is also a possibility. The soggier conditions are with that steady rain on Wednesday. It does taper off to showers Thursday morning. Keeping my eye out for Friday too. Potential is there for a very strong wind event on Friday. I'll be keeping my eye on that one as the week progresses. And then our next round of sunshine, well, Louise, we're going to have to wait until Sunday, I think, for any significant sunshine in the forecast. Louise?
Sun on Sunday. Makes sense. All right. Thank you so much, Jay. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
We'll see Jay tomorrow. We learned the new dates today for the Tokyo Olympics. The opening ceremony will take place on July 23rd, 2021, almost exactly 1 year after the games were due to start. There was talk about having them next spring, but organizers say moving to the summer will give athletic associations time to reschedule their qualifying events. Organizers say the cost of rescheduling will be in the billions of dollars. There is more Compass for you after this break.
I was just thinking about what's up in the sky. Do you ever wonder, Lucky, like, what's up there?
Well, that is PEI entertainer Robbie Doherty, also known as Silly Robbie. He usually does live stage shows for Island kids, but these days he's on YouTube because of COVID-19. The show is aimed at children 2 to 7 years old. And Robbie says it's all about using your imagination and having fun. He says his messages are to live healthy, love yourselves, and treat others with respect. Good messages for all of us, too. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Compass. You can log on to cbc.ca/PEI for more news from around the province 24 hours a day. Vashi Kapelos is up next with Power and Politics. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Good night, PEI.